joining us here today. You'll notice that we're missing Cian from Nearform. Cian was a pioneer in the space of remote work, particularly in Ireland and abroad many years ago. So he might pop in and jump on stage in a very but in a couple of minutes perhaps, but if not, I suppose we'll just head along here with Mark, who is in Skillnet. Mark, do you want to just take a couple of seconds to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Jordan, and I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Skillnet Ireland, responsible for all of our growth strategy and expansion plans.
Brilliant, so thanks a million. So I suppose this panel is around AI and remote and where they link. And Cian actually had a great line for it, which is both AI and remote. What they do is take away redundant jobs. So remote work takes away the commute, and AI takes away, I suppose, any automated tasks we might have had to do. So if we start off on that redundancy theme, obviously the chatter around AI in particular is what's the threat? So what would you say is the threat? Which particular roles might come up as being challenged?
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's a good question. And obviously it's on the minds of many workers and companies when they're thinking about deploying advanced technologies and AI into their stack or into their operational frameworks. I think a lot of the lower level roles, entry level roles, are the ones that typically are impacted the most. We see a lot of the customer-facing functions being replaced by advanced chatbots and different mechanisms for companies to engage with their client base without directly going through another human. And so a lot of those types of functions have been disrupted globally. And I think we'll see more and more of that as these chatbots become more advanced, but with that, I think what it represents is the opportunity for the workers to think about what their skill profile is and think about how they can progress further up the value chain within their respective organizations, industries, and sectors to be able to compete for those jobs that won't be disrupted by AI at this point in time.
Brilliant. And just to say, if you have any questions, if you put them in the app, I have it here and I can take any of those questions and bring them to Mark. We spoke about customer service there. So at Grow Remote, we're a non-profit. We're the only organisation in Ireland responsible for making remote work for profit, people and planet. And one of the things that we see across regional and rural Ireland is customer service roles are one of the first roles to go remote. And so eBay, Shopify, they both employ people in at least one county in Ireland. In every county, at least one person in every county in Ireland, sorry. And that's transformative for our communities, right? Because that's bringing in secure income and time into those communities. Now, if those are the first roles to be taken away by AI, how can we support that sector in particular? Like, what are the transferable skills that they can kind of take and move on to? What might be the jobs that they're moving into?
Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of really good core competencies that somebody who's successful in a customer-facing role and a customer support function possesses. And I think what we want to do is harness those skill sets and look at how you can augment that person's talent profile to make them compete for jobs and opportunities elsewhere, perhaps in an adjacent sector or in a completely different sector that's growing and has good opportunities. And certainly from a Skillnet Ireland perspective, we know that there are pathway programs that we see as being very effective in terms of taking somebody who's been very successful in a sector that's perhaps contracting, but also giving them the different types of skill opportunities and talent opportunities and qualifications to be able to enable them to be able to compete for jobs elsewhere that are perhaps more senior, on a different salary scale, and gives them that upward mobility and that gives them the ability to transfer those skills in an upward fashion.
I suppose the other link between AI and remote work is the business transformation that underpins both, right? You see something coming towards you and you have to kind of adapt the whole organization. So in the world of remote, we see organizations shifting over to a remote-first culture. The likes of HubSpot would have been a leader in that space. WP Engine would have been a leader in that space. Still have buildings, still hybrid, but it's remote-first hybrid as opposed to the maybe Salesforce model, office-first hybrid. So when we look at those business transformation kind of teams that might be being set up now in enterprises, what are you seeing there? How are they tackling it? Where are they even going to learn about how does AI apply to their particular business?
Yeah, and it's something that we've seen for many years now in terms of organizations looking at dispersing their workforce, and that's either through an offshore strategy or, as you say, Tracy, having support teams remote, perhaps from home, but operating in a matrix type manner. I think technology plays a major role in that, in terms of the stability of any kind of technological platform that an organization can work on. And I think what AI is starting to do from a predictive perspective is helping with some of the engagement gaps that people see when they're not in a traditional office working with colleagues directly. And you can see AI playing a role in there in kind of improving the level of engagement inclusivity for staff members.
Yeah, brilliant. Just for added context, I think you were telling me earlier on, maybe I should or shouldn't say it, I don't know, I'm sure I can, 60 million in a budget for training. That's kind of, you probably are the largest industry-led training program in Ireland, if I'm correct. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think, Skillnet Ireland, for anybody that doesn't know, we are the national agency for workforce and talent development, and so our model is to engage with industry, engage with the Irish workforce, and help enable upskilling and talent development. Again, our goal is to make the workforce more successful and make Irish companies and companies based in Ireland more competitive. And yes, we're growing each year, and we're able to support more and more workers and more companies across all of the major business sectors.
Sorry, there was a crow that literally flew across there, which you obviously didn't spot it. We were actually going to open this up when Cian was here with, should we just block AI from Ireland, as I suppose, just to lighten it up a little bit. But obviously there's some things that will just happen whether you invite them in or not. But I suppose on that theme, we hear an awful lot with remote work around the threats as well. So I heard just last week from an Irish organisation, multinational, we're not going remote because if we do it here, then they'll take our jobs over to Switzerland or Sweden or wherever else they were afraid of. What about the threats of remote? For the other threat I suppose we hear is so there's 100,000, because I have to get it in everywhere, decent remote careers open in every community in Ireland, right? All levels, all types, all roles. And if they come into, say, a rural or regional area, and they then take talent from a local employer who's been there for 10, 20, 30 years, is that fair? How does that affect that local employer who has been contributing to skills development, to the local community, to everything? And I suppose that's one potential threat. Is there anything else that you're seeing that companies need to, there might be a downside of remote, as well as kind of the downsides of AI are kind of more well known?
Yeah, and as I said, I think the engagement and participation are downsides of any kind of remote workforce, and I think it's incumbent on the leadership of any organization to make sure that they're able and equipped to manage a dispersed workforce. I think that's really critical here. Your point about the talent being absorbed perhaps from some of the indigenous SMEs, the smaller companies, into the larger companies, that is a pipeline that a lot of the foreign direct investment look at, the talent flow into their organizations when they come and land in Ireland. And I think it's really important that there is a flow of talent going from the university sector and through the apprenticeship models into the indigenous companies, and so that's just the natural flow. So within the context of remote working, it's really key that companies place an emphasis on the development of the staff and as well as the engagement level, because it's key, because I think any company that's investing in their workforce has more chance of having improving their retention and loyalty rates.
Yeah. What do you think about the companies, I suppose, who are looking? So we spoke to actually one employer just during the week, and they are not doing remote, hate it, very large employer, and they hate it, they don't want to do it because of data. So their data says that onboarding is worse, productivity is worse, everything is terrible with remote, so they're going to pull everybody back in. For those organizations that are kind of making that choice, how do you think they'll be ready for the future of, again, those kind of companies who will employ you anywhere? How will they be ready for that threat?
Yeah, well, all these organizations are operating in a competitive environment, and I think the worker of today has a certain expectation that perhaps they didn't have 3 years ago, which is the ability to be able to work in at least a hybrid fashion and having that flexibility. So I think companies that go all in either way perhaps need to think about the balance they need to strike with their workforce, with their talent, which is frankly the most important asset any company has. So I would encourage organizations to think that through, because I think it does present risks of attrition and again, levels of engagement and productivity. Either way, I think you need to strike that balance where you can get the most out of the individuals, and that they can get the most out of what their expectations are of working for that particular organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we did a piece of research with Square, and they were speaking about 98% of their workforce say they will stay simply because of their remote work policy. So it can be really powerful for talent acquisition when you remove one location from your career site, and also then retaining that talent. But equally, I suppose not everybody wants to work in an office. If anybody was listening to Ciara Kelly yesterday on News Talk, there was a big rant about that. So not everybody, and I suppose the clarity in the market that's coming is really interesting. Chowdhury asked a question that I was going to ask as well, and I suppose it is what kind of programs are offered by Skillnet to upskill and reskill workforce and to get organizations AI ready? I suppose, again, even me as a founder of Go Remote, and I'm like, right, busy doing the day-to-day stuff, very hard to work on the business and in the business if you're a bit of a smaller team. So where do I go? Is there something that you have on, that you're running, a program that you're running where I can kind of dip into it and see?
Yeah, and so great question. Thank you for asking that. The Skillnet model is one that we refer to as industry-led, i.e. so everything that Skillnet Ireland delivers out to the workforce and out to companies is demanded by companies. So literally we reach out and we survey sectors and industries and get the responses we need in order to curate and deliver the programs. So from an AI or machine learning, or from a data science or Internet of Things or blockchain perspectives, anything relating to advanced technologies, it's a big position that we take in that across all of our Skillnet networks in all of our sectors, where the points of entry now for industry have become lower, i.e. the adoption and implementation of these technologies 5 years ago so it was something that was just undertaken by the big multinationals, but now the barriers to entry have come down. But the skill lag is growing because you can adopt very quickly, but can you catch up from having the talent to be able to manage the deployment of this technology? So I would encourage anybody that's interested to look on the skillnetireland.ie website, where you can search through to see all of our partner networks in each respective sector, and reach out to our networks and talk about what the AI needs are of your respective businesses, and the solutions will be provided from there. Again, and that's subsidized through the Irish government too, so it becomes a very, very accessible solution for anyone.
I'm going to throw one at you now, but it comes in from somebody in the audience who maybe was anonymous because I said the name the last time, which maybe I shouldn't have done. Remote work works well in the US as homes tend to be larger. How do you see housing in Ireland affecting remote in general? And I can give you some breathing space for that with an anecdote. we were speaking to a very rural community who would say that if remote work is only ad hoc one-off cases where you earn enough trust and then you can move to Inishbofin, that can negatively affect the local communities. If it's systemic change and careers are available to everybody and skills programs are there to make sure that we're addressing that accessibility gap, then that's more of a level playing field. But we are hearing around housing and obviously very scenic areas in Ireland, holiday homes, all of that. And obviously this question might be tending towards as well, like working from the box room of your already small apartment in Dublin, feeling isolated. So I suppose, how do you think that, housing in Ireland is affecting remote work?
I mean, and this is not my area of expertise at all, but I do remember and still come across team meetings, which we seem to still have a plethora of, where you'll speak to somebody and they're literally, you can tell they're sitting in their kitchen and in an unergonomic way. And I know personally that I suffered during COVID, the way I was sitting, the amount of sitting I was doing. And I think regardless of the size of your house and the restrictions you have, I think remote working can be challenging because I think you do feel the need to be constantly in meetings and constantly productive. And I think it is a challenge. But the emergence of regional hubs and workspaces has been somewhat effective. I think more could be done to make them appealing and make them a place where people want to go and really commit to. So I think there are other solutions. And plus with the new emergence of this sort of more hybrid model now, where there's a lot of workers are rejoining their colleagues in an office or in a particular working premises, you're going to see more of that anyway. So I think with the hybrid model, some of the regional options, and maybe a more ergonomic approach to it, I'm not sure we can do much about the size of somebody's flat, but
two questions coming in are really, really good. So I'm going to give you one that you can answer in a minute just to finish us off. Remote and AI, overall, how do you see big corporations and new scale-ups need to shift their HR structure? And while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to bring in one question which is brilliant. Meta, Twitter, Tesla, Apple, many other companies are stopping full remote policies because they don't see it as it's working well. They have more data than anyone. How do we feel about that? Really interesting. So Meta hired a head of remote, Maidín, and within a year, Annie was no longer working in Meta, and they made a very ambitious statement at the start of COVID around being the best remote-first enterprise. In some respects, it's kind of like making a cold instant coffee and saying, I don't like coffee, but you just haven't had coffee from an espresso machine yet. I suppose there's a lot that's happening there for those cultures where they maintained an office-first culture while trying to do remote. I would look to the likes of HubSpot for that real in-depth data around remote first and hybrid. But just to finish this off on this question, what I think is really interesting, how will organizations need to shift their HR structure to deal with remote and AI?
Well, I think we see it now. I think HR teams and anyone involved in sort of the human resource element of any business is having to adapt on how the organization relates to a workforce that isn't in an office every day. And I think the structure of that is creating inclusivity programs and engagement programs that will enable that to become more effective. And we see it in our own organization where we've got a very distributed workforce, but we've got a strong cultural emphasis driven by our leadership team and through HR on engagement and inclusion. And I think that's the recipe for success, is striking that balance.
Super. Just to put in a pitch for a small startup, we've got a conference next week, 8th and 9th in June in Portlaoise, all about how do we have honest conversations around making remote work for profit, people and planet. So if you're interested in that topic in particular, we definitely love to see you there, and I can give you a few discounted tickets if you're interested. But thank you so much for your time. Really interesting topic. We missed Cian, but I can say that in Ireland he was the pioneer of of many of the technologies coming down. So definitely somebody to get connected with and follow. And thank you very much, Mark, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.